Hello again. This is Jack McCoy, and I am hosting this web series called Mastering the Art of Singing. And with Volume 9 here, I want to actually start another segment to these studies. Up to heretofore, primarily all these posts and blogs have been regarding kind of the mechanics of singing, and we kind of venture out from there other things, but that's primarily the focus. From this point on, at least for the indefinite future, I want to interview actually a variety of different singers, primarily people who are singers, and for the most part, people who've had classical training and how they've made use of that in what it is they do. Perhaps how they used it, how they adapted it, how it was useful to them, how it was not so useful to them, and all the different aspects of singing. Now, I'm going to some of these things that you look forward to, which might actually encourage people to subscribe to this channel, is one of these singers I want to try to get on here first is actually a Grammy nominated singer, and we'll get into his name as of later. But the thing is, he was classically trained and primarily worked as an opera singer, but he particularly thought he was very good at languages, and that's actually what led him to the Grammy nomination, because he did language that was not in the normal genre of opera music. Opera music, primarily German, Italian, French. Those are the main three that you will probably require to sing it. But he had a good knack for picking up languages, and which led to a whole album project that was entirely a language he was different from, but he was able to master it for a recording. And I think you'll find that interesting. But also he had very classical training, and also what's interesting about his career is that he kind of broke the mold. I was kind of told if you wanted to bring it to opera, that you need to go study elsewhere. Get yourself into opera, perhaps choruses in Europe. And I had an opportunity to join one in Germany. I just didn't have a strong enough motivation to do that. I had people with relationships in this country, and that was a pretty big step for me to take off and jump into that. And German actually wasn't my real forte anyway. I was probably more interested in doing things in Italian. In general, if you do operas in Italy, they're all in Italian. Germany, everything's in German, French, and this country is the only one that we do things in the respective languages. Like if it's a German opera or French opera, we do it in their respective languages. So anyway, those are some things to look forward. We're going to have some really interesting people. I want to represent a variety of people backgrounds, who did all different kinds of things with their training, and most of them had classical training. And so we're lining those up for you for the near future, and hopefully as early as next week. But for me, on this aspect of things, my training came from, as first of all, is just singing in choir and a special performance school. And we get little tips about singing when you're in ensembles and special performance groups and things like that. And there would usually be a little warm-up in the choir. They kind of run through some notes and things to kind of warm you up and get your voice expanded and lubed up and everything. But it wasn't until I got to college I majored in a voice and music composition major, because I had both interested in singing and writing music. And so this is kind of where I went into that field. And I started with a couple teachers there, Elizabeth Ferris, who I frustrated to no end. She was very down to earth, concentrated on opera singing, and she had a very good opera voice herself. It was kind of in that low alto range, and she had a very unusual and very beautiful voice, and she felt she could relate to me because I had a lower type of scale, so she picked out some things for me to do that were kind of our shared genre of music and some of the early things I did. And she even encouraged me to go out and do some things like audition for University of Washington. She knew one of the guys on the staff up there and encouraged me to contact her with him, and that's a good way to go. If you know somebody inside, contact a little bit, establish a little rapport. But when I actually went up there and did my audition, it's like I was just, not a serious enough student to really concentrate on what language I was singing in. And I veered off in my introduction into a French pronunciation, and it was like I didn't even know what I did at the time, but they spit it back at me because, like, usually people they come on, buddy, like, get with it. If you're gonna do this kind of stuff, you gotta take this serious. And I was just kind of like, okay, I guess I kind of blew it there. So I didn't get that a scholarship, and I did get into professional choirs. Well, let's just say church choirs are not necessarily professional, but if you get into a big city, they will have usually section leaders, like one person soprano, one person alto, one person bass, one person tenor, that they want to have as a kind of a ringer, and they want that person to be a more experienced singer. They can do the solos when they want to have solos. Everybody takes turns doing solos every Sundays, and also that person learns faster typically than the rest of them, so you kind of drag the rest of the people along with you. And so Elizabeth Ferris introduced me to that too, and I got a job at actually two different churches. First Christian, I think it was, and a Methodist church in Portland, Oregon. And I was able to do that, did some solo work there. And then, but where things really kind of started cracking for me was when I broke out of, I started doing some musical theater, and I was enjoying that, but it was community theater. You don't get paid for it. I was just doing it because I like to. And that's good to, put on your resume when you're experiencing things. And I enjoyed musical theater, particularly classic music theater, which is primarily about the voice. And that's where I met a fellow who introduced me to Dorothy Fisher Jones, and she had the School of Opera. And I kind of, resisted the idea for a while, but then when I did go to the rehearsals and start singing along, and actually got involved in singing a role called Leporello and Don Giovanni, I was just there to basically help them through the rehearsals and singing the part, and then I actually learned the part, and that was a really good experience, learning roles. That's when you learn basically the strength in your voice, longevity, how if you sing correctly, you can sing longer and for, better periods of time. And also that's where I learned some of the vocalises that I pass on in Volume 2. It's just a couple of the vocalises Dorothy Fisher Jones taught me to strengthen your voice, expand your voice, widen them. So from that, it kind of branched off into Portland Opera Chorus. I did a production with them, and then that got into the Portland Opera Studio, which basically was a touring company. It was a touring company with the Portland Opera. And we did tours around primarily the state of Oregon, and we did Marriage of Figaro, and I played the part of Bartolo, ended up being Figaro's father. I also got involved in educational programs, what they call Junior League, both sponsored by Portland Opera boosters, basically, and Junior League. And we would go around a gazillion schools all over the Portland area and do a little intro to opera programs. And so those were a couple of things that I kind of got my feet wet doing. And all this too, managed to working with an orchestras, Portland, the Oregon Symphony. One of the days was doing one of these programs with the Oregon Symphony, and one of the symphony guys told me about this guy called Norman Layden. And Norman Layden had been with the Glenn Miller Orchestra, an arranger, clarinet player with him, but also became a vocal arranger for people like Gordon McCrae. And anyway, he started, basically, he did the Portland and the Seattle Pops symphonies. Kind of Boston Pops was very famous on the East Coast. Well, he started the West Coast one, and I got to meet him through that way, audition, got to be in his group. And the first real big solo I did was with that group, and we did a little highlights of musicals and things, and my solo was, "There is absolutely nothing like the frame of a day." And that moment there, like, here's a whole orchestra, but I'm just singing it by myself, and there's like thousands of people out in the audience, and that was a good experience. Up to that time was the biggest audience I had performed for. But later I actually got involved in some of his pop series, and I did a featured soloist thing both for Oregon Pop Symphony and the Seattle Pop Symphony. And share experience there. Is the first time we did it in Portland. One of the things I was doing was Ghost Riders in the Sky. And I've always enjoyed doing kind of some of the old, very vocal Western ballad kind of music. And so here it was, we'd practice this, and he listened to me sing and wrote an arrangement. He was like that. He would just sit there and listen to you and write an arrangement based on how you felt the music. And he's very vocal orientated that way. So when it came time to do the performance, he hadn't told me that he added some special effects. And just before I started to sing, you could hear all this whirling kind of music, Ghost Riders on the side, trying to create this eerie music and stuff. And I was just like, what the hell is that? And I used to tell you earlier on things like learn how to sing in a storm. Well, this storm came up, and I didn't know it was coming, and I was just sitting there, and I looked back at that conductor, and he was sitting there waiting for me to come in, and I was like, dumb look on my face, like, oh crap, I missed my cue because I was listening to this stuff. Well, it would have helped if they told me this was coming, because I wouldn't have been a little less distracted anyway. So that was the biggest thing probably I had done with the orchestra, was soloing with the Portland and the Oregon and Seattle Pop Symphonies. But in order to keep myself going, it's like in between any kind of gigs there might be, and one of those gigs was called Opera by the Sea, which I absolutely love. We would do half the program would be an opera, half would be a musical theater, and there was a quartet of people, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and all really good, strong singers. And we got to go to Salishan at the lodge and get a night stay, and got some money and a free breakfast and the whole thing. And it was really a nice little lodge they had there. But in between things, to keep myself working, number one is I started a singing telegram company, and so I was able to like survive off of more practical type of things. Like people would call me up, and I would interview them, just ask them about who it is that they were going to sing this birthday song to or the anniversary song to, and I just ask them questions about those people, and I would come up with a little ditty. So my songwriting abilities kind of came to play, and making up these little parodies, and that's kind of how I try to make a living. And also, there's a whole variety of retirement centers, usually anywhere you live, and I try to put together a little promo flyer of the variety of types of programs that I could do. It honestly only started with just one thing. I just had a musical theater review little program for about an hour program, and I worked with a accompanist, and I did one gig of that, and suddenly everybody wanted to hear that program. So there was a whole circuit of retirement homes around the Portland area, and I would just boing, 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 go around and everyone do the same program. Well, then there was so much demand for that, I had came up with a second aspect of that, and then start broadening it out into other things like international music, a whole variety of like Irish, Italian, and some old English folk songs, things that were kind of in a international, like they call it international program. Just do a whole variety of that, then a variety of love songs, and then every little thing that come up. We had an Al Jolson program. I used to really enjoy Al Jolson for a time, and I had a whole program based on Al Jolson music anyway. And that was a way, just like every time I dropped something in, it was like it was a whole circuit. I'd go around, I could do that whole circuit of that music, and always kind of gave me something extra to do. And so that's just kind of some of the ways I've applied things. Now, also, this experience really came to a head because, whereas I was having to hustle all the time for do that kind of music, I had an opportunity to go more seriously into the opera field. But yeah, it involved travel and even international travel and that sort of thing. And once again, I kind of cited on I was really considering this very seriously, but then I was thinking about, well, I had people at home, I had rescue animals, and it just seemed like, well, I'm just gone. There's not really anybody to take care of these pets for me. So I just tried to do as much work locally as I could. And but then when this opportunity came up, it was actually presented to me by my friend Leila that they have opened up the Venetian Hotel, and they were looking for singing gondoliers. And he said, you could sing all day to your heart's content, and not have to chase around the countryside, come home every night. And I gave that a thought for a while, and then but then things at my workplace were kind of becoming less than ideal, and it kind of gave me more of the motivation to think, well, this is 1,000 miles away to move from where I am. I'm going to move away from immediate family and a lot of stuff like that. But if I can work full time doing this, well, hey, let's give it a shot. And that was back in the spring of 2001. So I sent an audition tape in, and they like people who can sing in Italian. They particularly like people who have classical trained voices, because they want when you're singing in a canal, they like people to be able to hear you. So that's where coming in, having the classical training really came in handy, because basically, I might have mentioned this earlier, but my voice teacher says you sing to the cheap seat, which means whoever's the farthest away. Now, it's not like you push your voice, but you just focus on that person, that they can hear you. And it's like, if they can hear you, then everybody can hear you. And that's just kind of part of the classical training that comes about. And this is how some of these things have really worked for me, and how they've bring it to where I am. And a lot of people just quit singing long before they're my age. And I'm very lucky that, I kind of stuck with it and had this opportunity opened up that I was able to get in, and at the time I was. And I've been here since August of 2001. First, I was hired as an outside gondolier in Las Vegas in the summertime, and so we actually have an inside and an outside ride. So my first goal was get indoors as fast as I can, but didn't really happen real fast. But over the time, you kind of put it together. You put schedule, try to weave it together, and all days in a row, and that kind of thing. And so eventually, I just work like a regular work week, like 5 days and 2 days off, kind of thing. So that's a little bit about me and my experience and how I've made it work. And yeah, all this pertains to how it focuses. But I'm going to show you something here. One of the things that we do, of course, here is Italian stuff, but also things that are in Italian. And when you have a kind of a voice that ever used to be able to do a lot of things, well, there's probably maybe no better example than this song right here. This song, if you're familiar with it, is written by Ed Sheeran, and it's called Perfect. But he did a version with Andrea Bocelli. And so you got Ed Sheeran singing his kind of light voice, and then Bocelli comes along in his full voice. Now, these are two different singers, but if you have classical training, then you can do something like this. I found a love for me, oh darling, just dive right in, follow my lead. I found a girl beautiful and sweet. I never knew you were the someone waiting for me. We were just kids when we fell in love, not knowing what it was. I will not give you up this time. Darling, just kiss me slow. Your heart is all I own, and with your eyes you're holding mine. Baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms, barefoot on the grass, listening to your favorite song. When you said you looked a mess, I wasn't learned it is but you heard it telling you look perfect tonight. Se la mia donna la forza dell'ande del mare, con le missioni e me segrete e molto di più. Spero che un giorno l'amor che ci ha accaparato diventi casa, la mia famiglia diventi noi. E siamo sempre bambini, ma nulla possibile stavolta non ti lascerò. Mi piace piano ed io tu non assistere e tu sguardato crescerò. Ballo con te nella oscurità, stretti porti poi più di noi dentro la luce della musica. Ti ho guardato ridere, tu sai essere vedi, ser perfetta. I don't deserve you, sei perfetta per me. There you go, guys. Keep on singing. Stay tuned for some interviews ahead for interesting singers and their stories, okay? Hey, keep on singing.